Imagine a world where a YouTube critic pressures Marvel so much that they actually have to change their entire approach. Well, that world is here. The critical drinkers' brutal takedowns of the MCU have left Disney scrambling to reverse course. But what did they do that was so bad, and how did one critic's voice amass millions of supporters to force Marvel to reconsider its entire strategy? From ignoring fans to forcing controversial characters down our throats, the MCU made some huge mistakes and the critical drinker wasn't afraid to call them out. Now Disney's backtracking, canceling movies, and even apologizing. But is it too late? Stick around to see how one critic, a massive fan backlash, and a few honest reviews could change the future of Marvel forever. The critical drinker's rise as a YouTube movie critic has been nothing short of meteoric. What started as a way for him to voice his opinions on films has transformed into a powerful force that even the biggest studios can no longer ignore. His critiques of the MCU in particular have gained so much traction that they've had a significant impact on Disney's financial decisions. Over the last few years, Marvel movies have been struggling to maintain the same level of quality and appeal that they once had. As a result, many fans have turned to YouTube reviewers like the critical drinker instead of heading to theaters. Why? Because watching his brutally honest reviews is a safer bet than spending money on a movie that might end up being another disappointment. The trend is clear: fans are more inclined to trust a critic than the studio that's repeatedly put out films that don't live up to expectations. This shift in how people consume movie reviews has caught Disney's attention. Faced with the reality of declining box office numbers and negative fan reactions, the company has started making drastic changes. They've canceled several MCU films, restructured their plans, and made a real effort to listen to the very voices they once ignored. Disney, it seems, has realized they don't have the luxury of ignoring critics, especially when those critics speak for an audience that holds the power to either support or break their future projects. One of the major lessons Marvel seems to have learned is the danger of assuming they know better than their audience. For years, the studio tried to push characters and narratives that didn't resonate with fans, hoping they could simply manipulate what the audience liked. They pushed characters onto the screen without giving them the development or depth necessary to earn respect. Instead of letting fans embrace characters naturally, Marvel tried to force them into the spotlight, and this is where they faltered. By listening to critics like the critical drinker, Marvel seems to have recognized that audiences want more than just flashy characters and plotlines. They want meaningful stories, well-developed characters, and respect for their tastes. It's clear now that fans are not just passive consumers, they're active participants, and they have the power to shape the future of entertainment. Ultimately, this change in direction might not have happened without the pressure from critics who voiced what the fans were already feeling. The critical drinker and others like him have become the voice of the audience, holding massive studios accountable for their choices. When Marvel's new direction didn't go as planned, they attempted to shift the blame onto the fans, labeling them as toxic when they didn't embrace the changes the studio had made. Marvel's response was to use manipulative tactics, bait and switch strategies to lure fans back, but these tactics failed miserably. Not only did the movies continue to disappoint, but there was also a growing backlash, amplified by one critic, in particular, the critical drinker. His video critiques calling out Marvel's mistakes and manipulations quickly gained traction, amassing tens of millions of views. This resonated with fans who felt similarly betrayed and frustrated with the direction the MCU was heading. Suddenly they realized they weren't alone. They weren't the only ones feeling let down by the forced inclusion of new characters and storylines that didn't connect with them. The critical drinker gave voice to their frustrations and provided a platform for these fans to gather and discuss their shared disappointment. It was an online movement that united MCU fans in a way Marvel hadn't anticipated, creating an undeniable force that put pressure on Disney to listen. The sheer size of this backlash sent a clear message: the audience was speaking, and they were demanding change. Fans had been telling Marvel what they wanted: compelling stories and characters they could care about. But the studio had failed to listen, attempting instead to push a political or ideological agenda ahead of the actual stories. This strategy backfired. Marvel's realization came too late. They had to understand that they weren't there to dictate what audiences should enjoy or manipulate them into liking something they didn't. They were supposed to be creating entertainment for the fans, serving the people who were spending their hard-earned money at the box office. The criticism got so loud and widespread that Disney's CEO eventually had to step forward and apologize. He acknowledged that the company needed to refocus on storytelling and stop prioritizing messaging at the expense of the narrative. But let's be honest, it would be naive to think this shift in strategy was driven by a sudden desire to improve storytelling or serve fans better. The real reason for this change was financial. The MCU movies were no longer bringing in the massive box office returns they once did. If these films were still making over $1 billion per release, Disney would have had no incentive to shift their approach. They would have continued prioritizing messages over stories as long as the money kept flowing. But the reality is that the money stopped flowing. Disney had to respond to this financial pressure, and that's when they started making changes. It's all because of the immense pressure from critics like the Critical Drinker, whose honest reviews and refusal to accept mediocrity resonated with millions. Fans weren't just complaining, they were vocal, united, and had the influence to force one of the largest entertainment companies in the world to reconsider their entire approach. The second major impact the Critical Drinker had on the MCU was his role in disproving the toxic fan narrative. For a while, Disney, Marvel, and other big studios had been quick to label any criticism of their films as toxic or bigoted. This was especially true for fans who disliked the direction of recent MCU movies, particularly those with a stronger emphasis on diverse characters or messages that didn't sit well with certain audiences. The tactic seemed effective, as it painted anyone with a negative opinion as hateful or prejudiced. However, the Critical Drinker and critics like him turned this narrative on its head. What made this so impactful was that the Critical Drinker didn't just criticize bad movies, he also praised films that deserved it. His reviews of genuinely good movies were positive and sincere, showing that his critiques were rooted in honesty, not an agenda. He was simply calling out bad filmmaking when he saw it, regardless of the characters or themes involved. This stark contrast proved to audiences that critics weren't out to tear down certain groups or ideas, they were just fans of cinema who wanted better movies. Over time, this shift became more noticeable. People started to realize that the criticism wasn't coming from a place of hatred or bigotry, but from disappointment over poor storytelling. Fans who had once been loyal to the MCU now found themselves frustrated by the lack of quality in recent films. It wasn't that they suddenly hated female characters or diversity, it was that they felt the stories were being sacrificed for politics and messaging, rather than being built on strong narratives. The turning point came when these critics gained more and more traction. It became almost cool to criticize the MCU's recent direction. This was evident when a presenter at the Oscars openly mocked a Marvel film. Even though it wasn't part of the MCU, it signaled that the criticism was becoming widespread, no longer limited to a small group of fans or YouTubers. Major entertainment sites and industry insiders started calling out Marvel's failures too. The narrative of toxic fans quickly began to lose its power because it was clear that the criticism wasn't about hatred, it was about the state of the movies themselves. This shift in perspective can largely be attributed to the influence of critics like the Critical Drinker. When he praised films like Godzilla Minus One, a low-budget Japanese movie that earned rave reviews from fans and critics alike, it further proved that his opinions were genuine. He wasn't just criticizing for the sake of it, he was recognizing quality when it was there. His honest, constructive feedback became a beacon for other fans, showing that the goal was to improve the industry, not tear it down. As a result, the toxic fan argument has started to lose its power. It's harder to dismiss criticism as being bigoted or hateful when the critics are just passionate about cinema and want to see it thrive. Fans are now seen as active participants in the conversation, offering valuable feedback that could shape the future of blockbuster filmmaking. This shift, led by figures like the Critical Drinker, has made it clear honest criticism is just that, honest, and it's helping to bring about real change in the industry. The final significant impact the Critical Drinker has had is the genuine possibility of the MCU improving in the future. While it may sound optimistic, there's a strong case to be made. The Critical Drinker's harsh criticisms over the years played a huge role in Marvel's financial losses. His videos, along with the collective voice of many other fans and critics, forced Marvel to confront the reality that they were losing their audience, which in turn forced them to make big changes. But those changes might be just what the MCU needs to get back on track. Fans are now holding Marvel accountable for the stories they tell, and as long as that pressure continues, the future of the MCU may become a lot brighter. What do you think about the impact of fan criticism on the MCU? Do you believe the Critical Drinker's influence will lead to real change, or will Marvel continue down the same path? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to Movie Saga and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on the latest updates and news about the MCU and the world of blockbuster filmmaking. Don't miss out. Stay tuned for more.